Alrighty, well, welcome everyone. Congrats on making it to the final session. We did it, yay. Hopefully we can keep the energy up for just 45 more minutes. The last few sessions I've had have been really interactive, gotten lots of feedback and questions, so hoping to keep that up with this session. Just raise your hand at any point and we can go from there. One thing I will caveat is that this session is oriented more towards how to set up Bicep with CI/CD. We're not going to be getting into super complex scenarios as a baseline. So if you are feeling like you've got the basics down, you know how to set up your Bicep CI/CD pipeline, and you want to attend another session, I'm not offended in the slightest, but just wanted to context set there. I don't think I've introduced myself yet. My name is Sydney. I am a PM on both PowerShell and Bicep, and I'm really happy to be here. So it's been great to see you all. With that, we can get started. So I first wanted to context set as to why this matters or why someone might use a pipeline. The first is that it enforces a consistent process. If every time you go to deploy, you always use your pipeline, you're less likely to introduce an unexpected behavior, an unexpected error, that sort of thing. And similarly, it's reusable across all collaborators. So you can, again, ensure a consistent process, not only for yourself when you go to use deployments, but maybe everyone on your team can all be using the same process, and it's integrated with your source control. So you can really manage what happens with each deployment. And then finally, a big part of pipelines or CI/CD is that it can be integrated with your compliance, validation, and testing so that you can have reliable and safe deployments with expected behaviors. So those are sort of the principles of like why someone might care about this instead of saying, oh, I just, go on my dev box, open a terminal, and start deploying. As I'm mentioning validation, compliance, testing, those sorts of things, I did want to plug a few ways that we'll talk about how you can incorporate these things using Bicep and what Bicep has to offer. The first is by using what if, which is probably familiar to you if you have a PowerShell background. I will also mention that there's work being done to improve the what if experience so it can be used more reliably in automation going forward. But for now, you can use it to at least kind of gut check what might happen when you deploy. There's also a test AZ resource group deployment commandlet, which does some validation without actually doing the deployment. So that's actually going to call out to Azure, check all the resources that you're planning to deploy, see if there might be any issues with that, and return that. And that's reliable to use in automation. And then I also put here, oh yeah, go for it.
Will that apply back to policy too? Policy gonna break?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And then I also included this snippet, which I'll show later, which is the validate task that we have in our GitHub Action for Bicep. And it's going to perform the same kind of check as the test AZ resource group deployment example. So what we're going to be talking about today is I'm going to show how to set up different pipelines with both Azure pipelines, so integrated with Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. Out of curiosity, how many folks use Azure pipelines today? And how many GitHub Actions? And who uses something else? Just out of curiosity, what are you guys using? Okay, same? Okay, cool. So if you aren't familiar, we'll keep this relatively brief, but Azure pipelines, as I'll show, are integrated with Azure repos, the overall Azure DevOps experience. You'll define your pipeline in a YAML file. Some terminology that you'll see if you're using Azure pipelines is that the pipelines will use machines that are called agents. The pipeline will run based on a trigger, and it takes two types of steps. You can have a script or a task that's going to be run. And then you'll hear the term jobs. Jobs are these collections of all the steps. And so here's just a really simple hello world example of what the YAML would look like in an Azure pipeline. So you can see there's, in this case, trigger is set to none. The pool, those are the agents that will run. And then you have your jobs with the step and a script example. Or sorry, you have your steps with the script and task example. All right, GitHub Actions, pretty similar here. Just have a few different terminology terms that we're going to use. So as the name suggests, we are integrated with GitHub here. Also defined in YAML, so you'll see it's pretty similar look to it. GitHub Actions use what are called workflows. That's what you'll run. A workflow contains jobs, which run on a machine called a runner. And you can run a script or an action. So those collections will form your workflow. I'm not going to spend too long on stacks here, although we do have a stacks expert in the audience. If you were at the bicep deep dive session, Angel did a great job of really deep diving into stacks. If you want to know more about stacks, whenever that recording is posted, it would be really great to check out. But I do want to mention it here because if we're talking about deployment best practices, stacks are sort of the modern evolution of bicep deployments. And so if you're thinking about setting up automation, you should be thinking about using stacks. What is a stack? A stack is an Azure deployment that enables you to manage the lifecycle of a collection of Azure resources as a single unit. There's a ton of benefits to stacks, but it can simplify the management of your resources and your deployment overall. Just some quick benefits as to why you might think about stacks. Simplified provisioning. They have these deny assignments, which can prevent unauthorized changes or accidental deletions. There is a feature set for resource cleanup. And it really is similar to the way you would deploy without stacks. It's just an enhancement on top of that. That's all I have for slides, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time demoing, but I want to pause here and see if there are any questions at this point. Okay, great. I do have my demos recorded as backup. I'm going to try and do them live, but if the Wi-Fi is not playing with us, we might switch over. Okay, so I just wanted to start in VS Code, and both types of pipelines we're going to show today can be integrated with your VS Code environment. I think it's important to start here when we're talking about good deployments, because one of the concepts in Bicep is shifting errors left through the type system, through linting, through IntelliSense, those sorts of things. So I would recommend, regardless of where you're going to end up deploying, to be taking advantage of those features when you are editing. So if you have your simple Bicep file here, I have a very simple file that we're just going to be using as kind of a dummy to deploy a storage account as we talk more about the deployment side of things or the automation around that. And if you have done this before, then you know that you could just deploy from VS Code a couple of different ways. So maybe you are used to using PowerShell for your deployments, or maybe you use the functionality in the VS Code extension. But we're going to take this and move it into a pipeline for the deployment. All right, so here I am in Azure DevOps. Text might be a little small right now. It doesn't matter. You're not expected to read it. It's the same file that I just showed you in VS Code. Simple storage account. All right, so as the name suggests, we're going to be using pipelines. I have some existing pipelines, but I'm going to create a new one so we can see the whole process. All right, where's my code? My code is in Azure DevOps. I'm going to choose my Bicep demo. Configure my pipeline. All right, I'm going to use a starter pipeline. This is the example that we saw earlier of a very simple YAML pipeline. Oh my gosh, I cannot type or spell. I don't even know if that's how you spell summit. Okay. That's why I need an editor, because I actually don't know how to spell summit. Okay. So we are creating the pipeline. Okay. Then we're gonna edit. Okay, so what's really great, and I wanna show you today, is these built-in tasks in Azure pipelines that make adding this really easy. So the first one I'm gonna show is the ARM deployment template task. So this is going to work for deploying bicep as well. And I have a service connection that I've set up in Azure with my pipeline. Then it's going to populate my subscription for me. Oh, and I also am doing it at the resource group scope, but you could use a different scope. We're good there. Did this change? Okay. I was like, that's not how it looked before. Okay, action. We're gonna create or update a resource group. The other option would be to delete resource group. I'm gonna choose this example RG. Location, I'm gonna do West US 2. Then for my linked artifact, I'm just going to put in my main.bicep. I don't have any parameters, and then I'm going to use incremental mode. The other mode that you might want to do is validation only. So that's what we talked about. Oh, that is what we talked about before, with maybe having a validate task or maybe even a separate validate pipeline in addition to your deployment pipeline. But for this, I'm going to use incremental. I'll take this. Thank you very much. Need a, yeah, dying. Can't beat a crispy Diet Coke. Okay. Okay, a few more settings here. I can give my deployment a name. PS Summit rocks. Any outputs, etc. Oh no, I just lost everything. Okay, wait. No. Okay, that's sad. Hopefully I'll go through this much more quickly. There we go. Okay, so now it just adds it for you in YAML. Of course, you could directly edit this file as well, but I think that the tasks are a really friendly way to add this content. You can validate and save. And go ahead and run the pipeline. Okay. Now, this is going to take a minute to run. So while we do that, I'm going to show you another way to use Azure pipelines. And this time we can incorporate stacks. Okay, so we're going to use the Azure PowerShell task. We'll start out the same. And what I like to do is just, for a simple deployment, use the inline script. And so here you can put in the Azure PowerShell that you want to run. So if you're used to running locally and you already have your Azure PowerShell that you're used to, we're just going to copy that. All that I have here, name, that's the name of the deployment, resource group, where the template file is, and then a few settings that are specific to stacks. I also use the force parameter. All this does is if my deployment stack already exists, it will still succeed. Alternatively, you can use a set commandlet instead of new, but new with force is kind of nice because it always will work. You can set your error action preference. You can set a specific Azure PowerShell version. I'm just going to use latest installed. And then I'm going to use PowerShell core. And again, all you do is add, and looks like this is out of alignment. Cool. This was the same task. It was just already added before. But I like that using this way, again, because you have more flexibility with how it runs with your Azure PowerShell commandlet and specifically the use of stacks. Let's see if this deployment has run. It's 3, oh, this is it. So you can see our deployment was successful here. It ran at 3 o'clock, which is now. Cool. And you can see that it deployed the storage account as expected. So our pipeline's working. Alternatively, with the inline PowerShell, you could, of course, also deploy it as not a stack. All you would do is like alter the commandlet to not be a stack, but that's it. Any questions right now about Azure pipelines? Make sense? Simple enough? Yeah, and one thing you could also do, again, is if you could use this and put in the test commandlet instead if you wanted just a validation pipeline to see like, hey, is this gonna work? You could also have it as a step earlier in your deployment and have it fail and stop the deployment if you are seeing errors. So there's different things you can do there. You can also use what if and take the output and analyze it. So there's a lot of flexibility. Okay, then we're gonna talk about GitHub. Cool. All right, this is again my same exact repo, just in GitHub, same exact, very simple storage account example. Okay, so GitHub, again, uses the term actions, and we'll do a new workflow just to show the whole process. I'm just gonna start with the simple workflow, and then we'll go from there. All right, so similarly to how ADO has the built-in tasks that you can use, GitHub also has a marketplace. And the task you're gonna wanna look for here is called bicep-deploy. So all you need to do is search bicep, and it'll be the first one that comes up. So we click on here. There is an option to just copy directly from here into your YAML file. However, I think that's not the easiest way to do this. This specifies everything possible with the documentation mixed in, and you're gonna need to add more to your workflow. So what I would recommend actually doing is going to the full marketplace listing, and this is gonna have the documentation for the action. Cool. So in terms of configuration options, you're gonna be able to choose if you want a traditional deployment or if you want to use stacks. In terms of operations, you can use the create operation, which is just, run the deployment. There's also validate here as well, which is what I showed earlier in the slide deck. You can also preview changes. Scope is gonna be the scope at which resources are deployed, such as tenant, management group, subscription, resource group. You pass in your template file and parameters file. And then there's also a configuration option for to include what if as well. And then these unmanaged resource actions are specific to your stacks deployment. So here are just some basic examples of what the deployment is going to look like in your YAML file. So you could copy from there. But what I actually would suggest is you keep scrolling down, and you'll see that there's two dependencies of this action. So you'll need to use the Azure Resource Login action as well as the checkout action. So what I like to do is go straight to these end-to-end examples. So I'm going to go to the deployments one. And it's going to show you the full workflow that you're going to need to get this working. So as we talked about, you have your steps. The first step is going to be doing the checkout. That's going to check out your code from your repo. Second step is going to be your login. And you'll notice that it uses this client ID, tenant ID, and subscription ID. So on the Azure side, you're going to set up your federated credentials for this application. And then I will show you. If you go to your repo settings, secrets and variables, and then go to actions, it gives you a place where you can set different secrets and then use them in your deployment using this syntax. So we'll use that a couple of times. All right, so this is where I recommend now copying over into your YAML file. And I don't need anything else in here. Cool. And so now we can edit it to tweak it to what exactly we want. This all looks good from the start. Okay, so I'm just going to do a deployment here. Create operation, that's correct. Development is the name of the deployment, that's fine. Scope, resource group, that's good. I'm going to use, instead of the parameters file, I'm going to use a template file that I provide, main.bicep. And so for my basic pipeline, that all looks good to me. Oh, I'm going to name this file though. Okay, and so then if we go here, we can see our runs, the status is in progress. It might take a minute or two to run. So while that's going, I'll show a little bit more here. Okay, so you might also want a validation workflow or what if. And so you'll see that the only difference here really is that the operation is now validate. And what if, and then let me show you. Okay, well, this is all the different inputs that you can have if you're curious. But you can also get outputs from your pipeline. And so this might be useful if you're trying to output, for example, like validation around what if. So you can output from your workflow as well. Let's check in on this. Any questions? Yes.
There's no secret in the workflow itself. How is it authenticating from GitHub to Azure?
Oh, yeah. Let me. Is this right? Okay, yeah, so what I had done previously is I have this managed identity, and then within it, I created a federated credential into my GitHub repo. And so I provided the information you can see for my GitHub repo here. So that is what I sort of like created before. And this could be defined in Bicep as well, or you could do it via the portal. And then you're going to take specific information from this identity, which I will be recycling after this demo. But then what you would do, so like if I have my subscription ID, as I was showing, we go to settings, secrets and deployments. This is where I put my subscription ID that I copied over. My client ID, which I got from my federated credential, my subscription ID, and my tenant ID. Save those in the repository secrets, and then GitHub is able to pull them while the action is running and authenticate into your Azure instance. And again, that's also using the AZ login action, which is separate from the bicep-deploy. It takes a dependency on it. So that's another action that's available in the marketplace. You can see that there are different ways to authenticate. For example, if you want to use managed identity, that's also available. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so Azure DevOps has multiple ways you can authenticate. Let me see if I can show you. Okay, so if we go to, okay, so in Azure DevOps, if you go to your project settings, and then you go to pipelines, you can go to service connections. So Azure DevOps uses primarily service connections to authenticate back and forth. So you can provide, create a new service connection. It kind of steps you through how to create a service connection depending on where you're pulling from. But let's say ARM. So these are the different types of registration that you can use. So you can use an app registration or a managed identity. It recommends you use an app registration, but that's again something that you would create in Azure. And then it'll walk you through giving the service connection here. Yeah, does that answer enough? Okay, cool. Oh, look, it succeeded. That's wonderful. Our pipeline worked. Success. So this, I didn't show this before, but this is the deployment stack we created in our Azure pipeline that deployed here. And then if we go to our deployments here, PS Summit Rocks, you can see the one that I just created from GitHub as well. That's about all I have for right now, but I'm happy to play around with other things, answer questions. We have like 15 more minutes. How many? Yeah, go for it.
Is there any way to parameterize, pass parameters into, I guess, any of these jobs or these pipelines?
Yes. Let's see if I can. So like within. So like in this case, you could pass in like template parameters, but I'm thinking you want to pass parameter into the pipeline itself. could potentially use these variables. I don't know. Does anyone know the best way to do that? Cool. Yeah, and this has some nice completions and whatnot. Yeah. 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 To repeat that, it's asking how it knows where the linked artifact is and it's relative to the root of your repo. Oh, so I think, yeah, so whenever I was like, if we were like, when we were first creating the pipeline, we associated it with the repo. So if you remember this, we went to like Azure DevOps and then I selected this repo. So it's associated to that particular repo. Yeah. Anything? Yeah. Yes, let's look at that. Okay, so it looks like you can define these outputs in the bicep template itself. And so that would allow you to type them. Let's see if there's more information here. Cool. I'll be honest, I obviously haven't played much with the outputs yet, but looks like there's some documentation on how you can use them. Here, has anyone? Yeah.
The only thing I would add is like the ADO YAML and the GitHub Actions YAML are essentially languages unto themselves. So it's worth learning like how do you declare expressions and referencing and things are a little hard to validate because you'll do a lot of like failed deployments until you get it to work, but get used to that rhythm and then you can reference outputs from the bicep file, you can do conditional logic, there's a lot that you can do with the pipeline languages.
Sure, yeah. Sorry, what was that? Oh, cool. Very cool. This is a great example. Any questions on bicep in general? Feedback? Was it nice to have it at the conference? Yes? No? Well, I'll plug a few other things while we're all staring at me. Let's see. Okay, I'm guessing quite a few of you were at the bicep deep dive this morning, but if not, let me show you this beautiful slide that we created. This is what I want to show you. Okay, how many people have been to a PowerShell community call? Okay, well, PowerShell, you should come to the PowerShell community call. We have one next Thursday, 9:30 a.m. this time zone. I'll show you how to join it in a second. But Bicep also has a monthly community call, and this is how you sign up for it to be up to date on all the latest Bicep news, so you can find out when things come out, how to use them. Pretty much for both calls, the majority of the engineering team joins, so it's a great opportunity to, outside of the conference, like get updates, get content, get your questions answered. Super welcoming technical audience. Additionally, if you're trying this stuff out, if you're trying out anything else you learned at the conference, if you're just using Bicep in general and you hit a bug, an issue, a frustration, you have a feature request, GitHub is the place to go. Bicep is also open source, and if you open an issue there, then we get to interact with you throughout the whole development process, which is cool. Finally, documentation, always a good place to start. But you can also give feedback on documentation. It's also open source. Since it sounded like a few people didn't know about the PowerShell community call, I'll show that too. Okay. So I am in the PowerShell organization, PowerShell-RFC repo, and then I'm in the community call folder. Third Thursday of every month, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to get the calendar invite or just join the recording, those both work. And again, this is where we've been keeping it to about 30 minutes for the most part lately, but some things you can expect, updates from the PowerShell team. Before every call, we just go around the team and try and think of anything that might be happening. And then also community involvement. We love demos from the community as well. And I'll show you one more thing. Okay, so before every community call, we post a discussion. So you can see this is for the April call. People have a few questions. We post the agenda before the call, probably not as early as we should, but again, we're just waiting till we have the most up-to-date agenda. I do have one in Teams that I need to paste in here. But I'm pointing this out because if you want to sign up for a demo, if you want to sign up to talk, if you want to make sure we get your question answered, you have a topic you want us to address, you go into the PowerShell repo, discussions, and then community call is the place to go. That's about all I have with that. I'll show one more thing, because why not? Okay. You may have also already seen this up a deep dive this morning, but I figure why not talk about future areas of investment for Bicep? So the first thing is migration from ARM templates. All this means is that we're working with folks to migrate from ARM onto Bicep, simply because we think it's more maintainable, we think it's more reliable. We have some data that it has safer deployments. And so that's what we're trying to encourage. I think I've talked to some of you all about this, but I think is maybe a little bit interesting to folks to hear, is that the ARM team, the Bicep team, the Terraform team, all the same team, right? All work together. It's not about who has more users or whatever. We don't get points for whatever. We just want to make them each as good as possible and encourage people down the best paths. Similarly, Azure CLI team, Azure PowerShell team, we're the same team. So we're not super opinionated about that just for the sake of being opinionated. We want all the tools to be as good as possible. But sometimes there's just a tool that's better, like Bicep is better than ARM. And so in that case, we have no choice but to favor it. So that's where the development's happening across the deployment team right now. Also working on some improvements to what if. If you have any questions about that, Angel's in the back row and can give you the rundown, but the short of it is deployment stacks are getting what if, and some significant noise reduction, so more accurate results that you're getting back that are actionable, and that goes into the short circuiting fixes as well. In the deep dive session, we also talked about Bicep extensibility, which is taking the Bicep language and applying it beyond just ARM. And so one of the new APIs that's coming out for that will be the Key Vault data plane. Yeah. Deployment stacks all up. It's GA, yeah. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we are just about at time. But what I want to know is I need someone to tell me either something they learned this week or their favorite session from the week. And then we can go. Okay, cool. I love to hear that. Very cool. All right, you can go party now.
I like using bicep-deploy on-prem stuff. That's what I like.
Okay, cool. I like that. Yeah.